Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we discuss the mystery of the Necrons within the Great Rift. Spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the Dawn of Fire series novel The Martyr's Tomb by author Marc Collins. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. So, the great thing about the Dawn of Fire series is that it's fleshing out the details of the Indomitus Crusade. It's allowing us to see Guilliman's great fight back firsthand. The wins, the losses, the struggles of the various Indomitus fleets. And it's all building up nicely to the next stage of Guilliman's Indomitus plan. The invasion of Imperium Nihilus, which we know is something Guilliman has long planned and wished to do, thanks to the Dark Imperium trilogy, which time-wise is set after the Dawn of Fire series. Guilliman is determined to let the people of Nihilus know they have not been abandoned. You'd also assume this is what's going to lead up to the reunion with his returned brother, Lion L. Johnson. And it's within the latest Dawn of Fire installment, The Martyr's Tomb, that we see the groundwork and footsteps continue towards this narrative be laid. With a Fenrisian rogue trader named Katla Helvinter, who's dispatched by Guilliman to find an alternate way across the rift. And through the events of her journey, she appears to find just that, naming it the Attilan Gate. Now, as any path or crossing through the rift, stable is a word that can only truly be used loosely, for even the most so-called stable of routes, such as the Nakmund Gauntlet, is still fraught with danger. However, this Attilan Gate did appear to be stable in a sense, a passageway through the storming currents of the rift that seemed to open and close on regular intervals, similar to say how the tides of the sea work, for example. However, regardless the gate was found, Katla achieved her objective, and it was during the initial investigating of this passageway or crossing where things got particularly mysterious. Aboard Helvinter's crew, there was an Adeptus Mechanicus Magos named Yazran, a tech priest who specialised in astrocartography, essentially the mapping of space. Indeed, it was his ambition to be the first person to record and map Imperium Nihilus, for his maps to be used across the galaxy, and for his name to go down in history. And on finding the gate, Katla instructed Yazran to study the rift and immaterium around the region, to understand and gain as complete a picture as possible. And his initial findings were positive, confirming the opening and closing of the crossing on regular intervals. That in all likelihood it had been that way since the rift was created. He even theorized it was by the force of an external power, wondering if it was an effort by the Emperor, the Omnisire, before of course logically casting the notion aside. However, then, he glimpsed something within the currents of the rift. Something black. And he tried to find it again, hoping it's some form of landmark he could use for mapping and navigation. And he did. It's described as in the Warp Shadow, a false god in Noctilith and metal. Noctilith more commonly known by the Imperium of course as Blackstone, the anti-warp material used by the Necrons in their pylons. This false deity is immense, on a throne, and its surface is said to be covered in monolithic constructs. At one time, this false colossus held the fabric of the galaxy together, and now in the current time, it struggles to do the same. Then finally, as Yazran gazes into this figure's eyes, a power begins to emit from it, whereupon Yazran's body is seized, lifted off the ground within his chamber, and for want of a better description, is burned from inside. So what was it? What is this mysterious metal and noctilif shadow within the rift? Well, I've heard some speculation that it was the Silent King, that Yazran somehow made a connection with Sarek himself. And look, of course, I do not have all the answers here. This is simple fun speculation as ever. However, it certainly didn't come across as Sarek in its description to me. I can understand why the mind would go there. Something clearly Necron, described as a deity and enthroned. It immediately sounds Silent King-esque. However, the rest of the hints and clues we receive just don't add up that way for me. Firstly, it's described as being covered in monolithic constructs. That doesn't sound like Sarek to me. He is absolutely not covered in anything. He is the perfect form of the Silent King. Secondly, it's a construct made of metal and noctilif. The Necrons use noctilif, but they aren't made out of it, at least as far as I'm aware. Thirdly, I don't think the Silent King would be described as a flawed colossus. He's one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and the master and ruler of the Infinite Empire. You do not call the Silent King flawed. And Colossus sounds far more construct and vast-like to me. And the real key here is perhaps after Yazran makes that connection, as he's being, unfortunately for him, fried. This construct is described as an edifice. Again, far more construct and large-like in its meaning for me. And Yazran's final thought as he dies is that if the Attilan Gate is indeed a pathway through the rift, then this thing is its ferryman. So while I of course could absolutely be wrong, I don't believe at this time that this was the Silent King. Instead, for me, it sounds far more like a vast Necron Blackstone construction, caught up within the rift, quite possibly sculpted in the shape of Sarek or another ancient Silent King, maybe even a Catan, before the Necrons overthrew them. It is undoubtedly a Necron construction that's responsible for the Attilan Gate, the crossing through the rift. Overwhelmed by the rift in its entirety, but able to push back the powers of the warp for a time. Now, the connection to it and killing of Yazran is interesting. As a very technological being himself, if somewhat primitive comparatively, it doesn't surprise me that some kind of connection could be made. Given the power of the device, and depending on when it was actually created, I don't think it's impossible to say it could be powered by an enslaved Catan, which would certainly explain that power it displayed. The Catan, despite being shattered and enslaved by the Necron race, are still frighteningly powerful tools for their Necron masters, as you may expect for former gods of the galaxy. And as for Yazran's final thought regarding it being a ferryman, it does open up some intriguing questions, the future of which we'll discuss next time. However, as for the past, it's clear this construction could well be part of the Necron Blackstone pylon network across the galaxy, and given its possible size and power, a very important part as well. Now, it's believed the network was originally created as part of the war against the Old Ones, as a way for the Necrons to contain and negate the Old Ones' psychic power. Given recently Abaddon and Vashtor also unearthed a relic of the Old Ones, and have used it to invade the Webway, could we possibly be entering a new era of discovery regarding the war in heaven? Are we beginning to see and learn more of what actually transpired? It certainly could be possible, and perhaps if this were the true reason for the pylon's creation, it would explain why Yazran was destroyed by it, because the Necrons would surely have some form of defense installed to prevent the Old Ones or Eldar manipulating it. I think that explanation is quite likely, and it would be absolutely tantalizing to start finding out more about what really happened during the war in heaven. Aside from the cliff notes and summary we already kind of know. However, I can't help but wonder if there is an alternative though too. We know the Eye of Terror was formed by the fall of the Eldar Empire, the birth of the Chaos God Slaanesh. Given the Necron pylons predate that, and given the new construct's position within the rift, with Yazran feeling it a ferryman of sorts, is it just possible we could find out the galaxy was in a similar position all those millions of years ago? That this is not the first time the Immaterium has flooded across the galaxy, and maybe the Old Ones were responsible. Maybe it could well have something to do with the weapon being sought by Abaddon. Maybe far from the noble and virtuous Old Ones as we have long believed, instead of it simply being the evil and jealous Necrontyr. Maybe the past wasn't quite as we've always been led to believe. Maybe we're on the path to finding out the truth. But as always everyone, what do you think? Is this mysterious blackstone object within the rift indeed a Necron construct? Or do you feel it was something else? Maybe Sarek himself? If indeed it is a construct as I believe, why do you feel it seems particularly powerful? Is it perhaps an important part of the Necron network? And do you think we could perhaps find out more regarding the war in heaven? And would you be surprised if the galaxy actually owed the Necrons a debt of thanks for eliminating the Old Ones, instead as we've always believed? In the grimdark universe we all know and love, would you really be surprised? But as always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.